Before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to the supporter of this episode, Curious. Curious is a technology, business transformation and experience design consultancy that helps its customers capitalise on technology's potential to accelerate growth and improve productivity and profitability. Curious can help you design stunning digital experiences and build a digital-first culture that will empower your business to thrive in a changing world. To find out more, visit www.curious.co.uk, and that's spelled QRIOUS, or call 0191 338 8093. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Talking Future, a podcast by the Entrepreneurs Forum where we talk to Northeast entrepreneurs about their work, their lives, and especially their views on the future and how they're innovating as they plan ahead. I'm Yvonne Bell, and today I'm talking to Darren Jobling, CEO of ZeroLight. Based in Newcastle, but with a global reach, ZeroLight's goal is to create the automotive customer journey for the future. By harnessing the power of augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, the business creates immersive 3D experiences that convert customers and work with leading automotive brands such as VW, Audi, and Lamborghini. Under Darren's leadership, ZeroLight has grown from a video games incubator into a leading 3D visualization specialist, working on international projects and worldwide deals. Recently, he was named one of the top 50 most ambitious business leaders in the UK and one of the most influential people in the Northeast. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning, Yvonne. How are you doing?
I'm fine. And after saying all of that, I'm quite confused because it's really not my thing, all of this. What I was wondering, Darren, if you could give us some background as to where it started, because given that I've done a little bit of stalking, which is normally known as research, I've noticed that video games probably weren't about when you were a young boy. Is that right?
Yeah, so to be honest, video games are absolutely in their infancy. So I remember a friend of mine had a ZX81 computer with a 16K RAM pack on the back, and we used to play Flight Simulator. So I was interested in computer games from an early age. And although I did computing O-level, which I think really teaching kids nowadays to program is an absolutely key skill amongst English and maths, but let's leave that there. So I went off and I did a physics degree, and I went to work on a fast track graduate program on sales and marketing in London. And then meanwhile, my brother formed a game company called Zeppelin Game. And when he was forming that company, he had a title called Kenny Dalglish Soccer Manager. And Kenny Dalglish Soccer Manager was the #1 best-selling game in the UK. So I rang him up one day and I said, well, it's amazing that you're obviously doing so well in the UK. How is it selling in the rest of Europe, France, Germany, Italy? He was like, oh, I don't sell it over there. I just sell them in the UK. So he says, why don't you come up and join in and we'll sell them abroad? And that's really where the games industry link came in.
So did that include the USA?
Yeah, so what we did, we had a game called Sink or Swim, and we sold it to a company called Merit Studios out of Dallas, Texas. And being Americans, they, within a very short space of time, said, hey, we would like to own your company. so it seemed like a great idea at the time. I was about 25 years of age. And the whole idea was that we were going to be their production center, and they would sell the games in the US, and we would take their games to the US and sell them in Europe. So they had 4% preference shares floated on the NASDAQ. And when it got to $6.50, everybody could float off. And they got to $6.25 before
didn't quite make it.
Didn't quite make it. So what happened is we ended up sending them back money, which seemed a bit odd. So we just came to them and said, hey, maybe we should buy it back. And then we bought it back 3 years later. In terms of ZeroLight, I've always loved cars, and I've always had a secret fantasy of being a car salesman. And at the time, it wasn't maybe, I think people got a mixed opinions on, shall we say, on car salesmen. So really, what I think I'm doing is I've eventually achieved that ambition. We are selling vehicles, but we're selling vehicles trying to engage the customers with as much fun as if it was a computer game. And that's basically that, all a computer game is an engaging customer experience to get you hooked. We're bringing those exact same skills to the world of car buying. It should be fun, it should be exciting, but you should enjoy it.
And do you think that the enjoyment had gone out of buying a car? Did people not find it enjoyable anymore?
I think less than 1% of customers say they enjoyed the new car buying experience. It's one of the few things where it still feels like you're negotiating in a Turkish bazaar. I remember I was in a dealership in Newcastle, and we're buying my daughter, she was 17 at the time, first car, and we were negotiating over £10. So, and I was going at it with it was a lady salesman. We were going at a hammer and tongs over £10, and my daughter got up to leave and said, "I just can't bear this." I said, "Well,
wasn't fun."
It wasn't fun. So I think it's generally not an inclusive process. People find it intimidating, and I think also that this explains the drop off in dealer visits. A decade ago, the average person went 7 times to a dealership before they decided on a vehicle. Now the current average is 1.5. So people are doing all their research online. They're finding out what Jeremy Clarkson thinks of the car. They're watching all the reviews. They know how much the part X is worth. They know what the finance deal is available, and they're just going in to transact. So what we say is that at least mentally, people are buying a car online. It's just that the buy it now button is in a dealer. And you'll go into that dealer, you'll either hit the buy it now button, or you'll go off and find another dealer who will give you that deal you're after.
That's a very from your background, I don't suppose you'd come across doing that financial thing before, had you? Had that come into your life before?
It certainly hadn't to that degree. Now, I actually really enjoy the legal side of things. I'm really into contractual stuff and that sort of thing. It was my first real exposure at that level of contracts. I remember that we'd employed a local solicitor to do the deal, and it was back in the day, and he ran out of fax paper. There's that many sheets of they'd spent a fortune with some of the biggest lawyers in the US, and so it was a major learning lesson. Was obviously we spend a decent amount of money on great legal advice, which I would always which I would always recommend, especially for high value deals. But it also was just a great lesson overall in understanding US mentality was super important for us. Great learning lesson, and just opening up your mind to the possibilities of the world, I think.
Yeah. And you, like you say, you were quite young then. So by about 29, you had your company back. And where did you go after that? What sort of path did you take?
Well, we did so we've done a few different. We did a buy-in management buyout with a trade partner, and they fundamentally provided the money. And we became Utechnics, the driving and racing game developer. And we worked with our trade partner for 3 years, and then we bought the company back in its entirety. New Year's Eve 1999 or something like that it was, where we got the company back. And then since then we just built up the company, and ZeroLight formed as an incubator within that company in about 2012. And what had happened was the visual quality that you could get from computer graphics had reached a minimum quality level that was acceptable to the car manufacturers. And then fundamentally, ZeroLight was born in March 2012. The first thing we did was the launch of the Jaguar F-Type for Paris Motor Show with IBM. And then Jaguar Land Rover didn't really understand what they had and how revolutionary it was, but Audi did. And Audi's known as obviously Vorsprung der Technik, the innovation OEM. And at the time they were launching these Audi cities, which were digital dealerships that were basically in shopping malls or in high traffic areas. Yeah. And they only had one car in those dealerships, and they sold the car via digital screens. And Audi City had been a tremendous success that had lots of upsell, but it wasn't scalable. So the current system that they had something like £250,000 worth of server architecture to run it. And then we rocked up and said, well, that's crazy. You can run this on a £3,000 gaming PC and every dealer can have one. So that's really where we start and became Audi's official visualization supplier.
So just step back one step and explain exactly what you're talking about in terms of the visualization. Where does that fit in with, say, if I was to go into a dealership, say an Audi dealership now, what would I see now that has your stamp on it? What is it you're telling me about?
Yeah, so everybody knows the problem with a car dealership, which is the car that they show you isn't the vehicle that you're going to buy, or very rarely. If you're going to order stock, that's great. So what we do is we don't replace the need for you to see a physical car or take a test drive, but what we do is allow you to configure your car with everything fitted to it and see exactly what it's going to look like. So what you would see, say if you were to go into the Audi dealership on Scotswood Road, you'd see a digital lounge. And in that digital lounge, you go in and you can configure the car that you want to order with everything, child seats, roof racks, cycle racks, the whole shooting match. And you can see the exact car that you're going to buy and explore it. And if a person goes through that process, in a dealership, they're more likely to spend an additional 15% on upgrades.
Wow.
So, and obviously that's where they make most of their money in terms of the accessories.
Yeah. Whereabouts would the normal person find access to AR and VR? I mean, it sounds all of a mystery to me.
Yeah, so actually I would think that augmented reality and virtual reality, let's explain the difference between them. So augmented reality is when you add something to the world around you, a little element. So a good example of that is anybody who's ever been on Snapchat, and then you can add a little dancing figure into Snapchat. That's augmented reality on your phone. So it's just something you add to the world around you. Virtual reality is something totally different, where you wear a headset and that blocks out the world and you go into a different world. So really, we see augmented reality is very, very accessible. It's the way of the future. We see that, the Amazon of the future will be based on your mobile phone. And we're a great believer that your living room will be the retail space of the future. So if you're interested in buying a food mixer, you'll be able to go to Amazon, look at the food mixer, and then have that food mixer in front of you on the coffee table and be able to look at all of its features before you buy it as in augmented reality. We could be looking at say an Audi dealership in Leeds. I could send you all the cars on their forecourt and you could be scrolling through them and looking at them without any dealer involvement whatsoever. And I think there's a time for reassurance, but you also don't want to be hassled. There's times when people go in and just want to look around and kick tires and don't want to talk to anybody. But then when there's one, you go in and, hey, I need to talk to somebody because I want to do a deal. So that's the direction we're heading towards. In terms of if you want to experience ZeroLight, most probably the best way of doing that is if you go to Lucid Motors. They're the new electric vehicle company that are here to challenge the likes of Tesla, and their entire customer journey has been provided by ZeroLight. So when you go online, you'll get a totally interactive car that you can take to various places in the world. You can open the door, the trunk, see all the charging ports. All of that software is ZeroLight. I definitely encourage people to do it, and it's a great car. But then also they have these Lucid Studios. So if you go into a Lucid Studio, what you have is a virtual reality headset and a model of a car. So what you can actually do is put the virtual reality headset on, you're exported to another world, but then what you can see is your car in that other world and touch it and interact with it.
And that, I mean, I get what you're talking about now. And so is that ZeroLight's USP? Is that where you really shine?
I think the key USP is obviously graphical quality, but the actual thing that's very undervalued is its global scale. So we come from the games industry. Games industry is about engaging with millions of customers all over the world. So what we do is put the systems into the car manufacturers that replace silos, sort of individual things, with things that can be scaled globally via the cloud. So with Audi, with their online configurator, where you have an interactive car online, we roll that out globally for Audi. So it's across the globe. You can see it in China, in Japan, in the US, in the UK, in Europe, in Russia. And I think that's the key. That's the key to it, is really how do you use the cloud, the power of cloud, to scale it globally? And then obviously you multiply your available market by a number of factors.
Mm-hmm. And have you stuck with the car industry then, or is this because it's huge anyway?
Yeah, so I think when we were in the startup phase, it's very important to have focus. And there's lots of people as a startup will try to drag you in all sorts of different directions, and you'll be very tempted to run with it to chase revenues. So coming from the world of driving and racing games, we were very, that was our area of expertise. It made sense to stick to automotive. So what we did is we, if you like, established leadership in automotive. You're generally known as, I think Top Gear last month said ZeroLight produced the world's best car configurator. So established dominance in that one area and then spreading out. So currently we also do BRP, Bombardier recreational products, which is things like Ski-Doo, Sea-Doo, quads, trikes, all this sort of stuff. So and there's other deals that we're working on at the moment. So really the car is just a digital model. So the same system can be used for anything really that's highly configurable and normally has a high ticket value. So another good example is obviously commercial vehicles that tend to be very configurable
and very expensive at the top end.
Yes, indeed.
Lots on them. That was a big thing in that industry. We're very, very technical because these they do more things than you would even know about. So and I suppose from your point of view, this is your foray into being a car salesman, isn't it? Without actually doing it.
Yeah. So I think data suggests that less than 1% of people are happy with the new car buying experience. So really what we're trying to do is revolutionize that, engage and delight consumers. There's no reason a car buying journey shouldn't be fun, shouldn't be enjoyable, should be free of stress. So what we're trying to do is to reshape the car buying journey into something that, regardless whether you're spending £2.5 million on a Pagani or whether you're spending £10,000 on a Vauxhall Adam, as an example, you still have a 5-star service. If we were to walk into a jeweler's, not that we can at the moment, but if we walk into a jeweler's in Newcastle and said, "Hey, I'd like to spend £10,000 on a piece of jewelry today," you'd get the 5-star treatment. And we believe that every consumer buying a vehicle should have that 5-star treatment.
When it comes to lockdown, and obviously, we've been in it a year now, when it was announced, most manufacturers and dealerships had to pause production or close. Some dealerships did, some dealerships didn't. And did this lead to a higher demand of your product?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, there's no disagreement that COVID has been a global tragedy that's affected everybody and has certainly affected the automotive industry. However, what's key for us is that we see COVID is just an accelerant to what was going to happen anyway. So things like home working was going to happen anyway. Yeah. Certainly the move towards online purchasing of cars was going to happen anyway. It has just been accelerated. And the really good news for ZeroLight is it's accelerated that thinking in our direction. When we first started talking to the car manufacturers, it was like we had arrived from a different planet. So we can do something for you that's better than what you currently have, and it's cheaper than what you currently have, and it's easier to implement than what you currently have. And a lot of them said, "Hey, this can't quite be right. It's like too revolutionary." But what's happened now is their mentality has moved to, right, okay, how am I going to sell my vehicles online? How am I going to make dealers relevant in the future? And all that sort of thinking moves us definitely in the direction of ZeroLight.
And I suppose what you're giving them is a balance. They've got to still provide this, the human touch, even after lockdown. They've got to provide that bit. They've still got to do that right. But you've got the other bit.
Yeah, and I think I think that's definitely underestimated. So people underestimate that human conversation and that level of understanding of the product to get people over the line to purchase. So a lot of the things that we've been doing is we don't believe that dealers are an irrelevance. We think the dealers will need to change. But what's going to happen is your customer journey is going to be swapped around on its head. So maybe you start in a dealer and you finish in a dealer, but similarly, you could start in a dealer and finish online. So you could actually purchase your car online. Mm-hmm. And I think the automotive industry is currently working on systems to reward dealers in that event. I think Volkswagen have announced that they're going to use dealers as agencies where they just get a percentage of every single car sold. And that's definitely the direction that we're heading in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For new cars, I think used cars is probably different, but there are some ways to help that as well. So obviously you are growing significantly, I would imagine, and to meet that growth, many tech companies are sort of having to hire talent from around the world. Is that what you're having to do?
Yeah, so we think of ourselves as a global company, and we certainly think of ourselves with a global talent pool. So we have obviously offices in the US, in Germany, in China, but we employ people from all over the world, and it's actually sort of confirmed the fact that somebody could be based, say, in Brazil and still work for ZeroLight. So in actual fact, it's been a good thing because we're now throwing that talent net ever wider. And because obviously you're seen as a market leader in this area, people generally want to work with a market leader. And I think it's great when you get the big tech companies, the likes of Apple, Facebook, Google, etc., coming to the Northeast back in, prior to lockdown, where they came to the Northeast to see what a company in the Northeast was producing. And I think that's a big testament. They say, how do you make graduates stay in the Northeast? It's fundamentally by giving them exciting companies to work for and say, hey, you can be a world leader based in the Northeast, and these world leaders will come to you.
Yeah, that sounds like a real good plan for the future for our area, doesn't it?
I think so. I think one of the difficulties we've had in terms of attracting talent is it's always been, it tends to be very difficult getting talent from down south. So it's actually easier to bring somebody in from Germany than it is to bring somebody in from London.
Why is that?
I think it's the perception of the Northeast. I think, to be honest, until you come up and experience it. So our chief product officer had worked all the way around the world. He worked in New York, he'd worked in Japan, and he was at Amazon working in London. And it took some persuading to get him to come up to Newcastle, but now he's here. He loves it. But I think that's the problem. I think it's very, very difficult because of preconceived ideas about what it's like in the Northeast. And I think the larger we can make the ecosystem of great technology companies, and there are, some very nice technology companies in the Northeast of England, the greater we can make that talent pool, the more likely we are to attract talent. So, hey, if it doesn't work out at, say, ZeroLight, there are other companies I could go to in the Northeast. I wouldn't have to relocate again.
Yeah. I mean, just doing these podcasts, I'm just amazed by the talent and the variety of businesses that we've got up here. It's just amazing, and it does make me proud. Because we could have just let it all go after we lost all the big industry, years ago, but we haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a very strong history in terms of engineering. And all programming is fundamentally engineering. So I just see it as an extension of that engineering heritage. So that's why I think we're successful. I think there's a very good work ethic, and I think there's a definitely camaraderie to, the company has a heart, which I think is very important.
Yeah. What's been the biggest obstacle to ZeroLight's growth? Is it, financial? Have you had to look to someone for money, or, you seem to have got that one sorted out?
I suppose access to finance is always a key issue for most entrepreneurs. So we were a very classic textbook case of how it could work via the Jeremy Fund, these funds that came in the Northeast. When we first started in the games companies, it was all done by remortgaging your house, credit cards, etc. However you could assemble it, because if you looked at VC in the phone book, there was in the Northeast, there was nothing there. So obviously the Jeremy Fund came in, and then we had an interaction with Alistair Gregg from North Star. And he opened our minds to some sort of different possibilities. And we did a classic thing where they give us 60,000 to do a proof of concept. We developed that proof of concept. And then Alistair also introduced us with the proof of concept to Europe's leading technology VC, which is Prime Ventures out of Amsterdam. And Prime Ventures became an investor in the game company, and they're also the investor in ZeroLight. So I definitely think that was a very good example of how it can work in the Northeast. I think we should be very concerned as to how we're going to replace some of that European money. I know the government's got plans for that, so let's hope that those come to fruition. But I definitely think I'm a great believer in invest in strengths and forget about weaknesses. So in the Northeast, we have some standout companies. We should be investing in those companies, not spreading the money thinly. I think, if somebody's got a great idea, we should be investing in that idea, because if you invest in an area where you're good, you can be a world leader in it. Fundamentally, it becomes an ecosystem. And that's really what happened at the start of the games industry in the Northeast. A whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs developed, of which my younger brother Brian was one of them. A whole ecosystem that was just literally an entrepreneurial cluster. It had nothing to do with the universities. It was just literally a bunch of hackers, for want of a better expression, getting together at the Discovery Museum in Newcastle on a Saturday afternoon. So I had a car, I had a Vauxhall Viva Coupe, my first ever car at 17. And Brian was 15, and I used to drive him across to the Discovery Museum on a Saturday afternoon. And all these guys got together, and then obviously Brian came up with a system to protect computer games, and got, I think it was 2p a cassette, because they used to sell them on cassettes. And my father was director of Royal Ordnance in Berkeley, that had like 2,500 staff. And my younger brother, by the time he was 17, was earning more money than my dad at 2p a cassette. And literally, you can trace those young people. One person there sold a game to a game company and got cash. And then everybody then came up with the ideas. And then literally, the half a dozen game companies that came up out of the Northeast basically come from those natural entrepreneurs. And then obviously then people got sick of the games industry and went into academia. And then they had the games industry courses. And it became the whole ecosystem. But I just don't think in the North, we didn't appreciate it and didn't invest in it at the time. So it's not as strong as it once was.
Yeah. Now, do you have any plans to apply the technology in other areas? Because it's all cloud-based, or it's a lot of cloud-based stuff going on. So is it something that other industries can do?
Yeah. So we are doing lots of stuff. Say, for instance, typically the auto industry would, for example, would have trade shows where they'd invite people all the way from all around the world. There's one every year. The big one in September alternates between Frankfurt and Paris, but this year it's in Munich. And what we're working on is technology where those people can no longer gather together, but what we're doing is sending a virtual car to everybody's desktop. So when they reveal a car at IAA, which is the motor show, people can see that all the way around the world. So it's not something that we're doing in terms of press and PR. We're still squarely in the sales and marketing of highly configurable, normally higher ticket value items, but certainly we're expanding our reach into other verticals.
Yeah. So on that vein, what will the face of the industry look like in about 10 or 20 years? Have you any idea? Because it's moving fast, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think it'll be a way more pleasurable buying experience in 10 years' time. I think there's a massive move towards online. So I think Gartner was saying that by 2023, they're estimating that 20% of all new vehicles will be purchased online, which is up from about 1% currently. So there's a massive growth area going to happen in that direction. I think dealers will need to evolve. They're going to move into, say, the likes of shopping centers and be more experiential. There has to be a reason now for you to want to go to a dealer. And there's no doubt about it, the big platforms are eyeing this market very closely. So they think that by 2025, Frost & Sullivan says it's going to be worth new cars, well, all car sales plus aftermarket is going to be worth about $605 billion. So everybody's, the likes of Amazon, working with Amazon at the moment, putting configurators on their system. We're working with Facebook now, putting configurators into Facebook. So I think what you're going to see is accessibility to those sort of experiences are going to be proliferated across the net. They're no longer going to be just the preserve of the car manufacturer's site. And then another thing that you're going to see a lot of is personalization. So both you and I will have different Netflix homepages, different Amazon homepages, different Spotify homepages that are personalized to us. So this is what we're working on currently at ZeroLight. So when a customer is configuring a car, we're tracking anonymized user behavior 10 times every second.
Wow.
And we're using that to personalize your journey. More of people who bought this also bought that. So literally in the world of tomorrow, you're going to go on a configurator, you're going to make a car and maybe you leave it behind, which is what most people do. The next time you see an advert from that car manufacturer, the car that's in the advert will be the car that you left behind in the configurator, complete with child seat, cycle racks, in the color with the alloy wheels and all the options fitted. The advert that you see will be the advert featuring the car that you were looking at.
Wow, that is futuristic to me. That sounds way ahead. Probably not much different to what you think of now. It'd be going on in your brain all the time, is it?
Yeah, I think so. It's like most, you're always working on what's all about creativity. I love working with creative people. And I think the key to creativity, the key to proper creativity is when somebody comes up with a better idea, you're willing to drop your idea because you realize that's a better idea. And I think that's a lot of people who think of themselves as being creative don't have that flexibility to think, hey, that's a more creative idea. That's a better idea than most people hang on to their own ideas for grim death.
And so that's the way to move on. Just keep your mind open.
I think so. I think that you don't have all the answers. I definitely think that one of the mentality is that the future is unwritten. And most people, is, I think somebody once said, fear is future events appearing real. So most people spend a lot of time worrying about, well, if this happens and that happens and this, and they get themselves extrapolated out into a whole world of fear. Whereas in actual fact, the future is empty. You have to write the future. Don't get carried away with your own thoughts. Just think optimistically. Hey, good things are supposed to happen to me. And somehow, if you maintain that belief, you'll get there.
That's like a mantra, isn't it? In these stressful days, when people worry about everything, it's a good mantra.
So there's a really interesting guy, and I would encourage people to look him up, called Peter Crone. And he's called the Mind Architect. And he's a very, very interesting guy. And he said something to me, which I think it was very key for me. Now, everybody has stuff that happens in the past that they go over. What happened? That deal went wrong. I had a relationship that didn't work. I lost a loved one. And what happens, what he said is, when you think about the past, you have to say, whatever happened, happened. It couldn't have happened any other way, because it didn't. And if you really embrace that and lean into it, it's a really, really good. A lot of time people spend a lot of their days thinking about things that happened in the past. Should I have done this? Should I have done that? In actual fact, if you just put it to bed and say, hey, it happened, it didn't happen any other way, that's it, it's done, you can then begin to move on. So I would definitely encourage anybody, especially under these, the lockdown restrictions, etc., that Peter Crone's a very, very interesting guy to listen to.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about anybody you follow. He's obviously one now. You follow as an entrepreneur. You see them as somebody who you'd like to be like, or you sort of respect the way of doing things. Is that one of yours?
Yeah. So I definitely. So I think Peter Crone. I like a lot of stuff he says. So about the present, he says everything is exactly as it should be. No matter what we do, if we shut our eyes down and concentrated really hard, we wouldn't really be able to to do anything. So basically everything's exactly
Mm-hmm.
as it should be. That's it, and the future's unwritten. So I like Peter Crone. I also like Les Brown. I love Les Brown, who's the motivational speaker. I just love his optimism and tenacity. And I think it falls into, there's a quote from Henry Ford that I always liked, even when I was in the games industry, which is that whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. So it's about that positive mentality. And if somebody's shutting the door on you as an entrepreneur, it's your job to be going in through the window. It's a case of never give up. Never, ever, 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 ever give up, because while you're in the game, there's a chance you can make a difference, and you've got to stay in the game.
Well, that's a good place to end. I was going to ask you about what advice you'd give, but I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've got to look after yourself, look after your mental health. I do something whereby I get up a little bit earlier. I'll sit and read 10 minutes of a book, so educate myself. And then I'll do 10 minutes of a new things, 10 minutes of meditation or mindfulness or whatever. And it just helps you to set up for the day and just think, hey, the day is full of possibilities. Go and exploit those possibilities.
Great. Well, thanks very much for that, Darren. Very interesting. And I understand a little bit more about VR.
Great, good stuff. Well, we've achieved something this morning.
Yeah, we have. Okay, well, thanks, Darren. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne.